or visit the KnerfLerb. Come spend a month in the KnerfLerb with Pete and his friends. Been learning some life skills and now everything's okay in the end. Life's is sure to be gloomy when the KnerfLerb's so roomy. I've got a good feeling now that everything's
Who dropped this?
Hey my friends, today we're looking at CPM D2. That's right, the less heard of D2 still. Really, when you think of it, you get your normal D2, which is in everything. And then you get your CTS XHP, well regarded, used to be Cold Steel's flagship. Spyderco still use it a whole bunch in their Taichung factory. And then you got a lot of custom makers using XHP as well. That's a micro melt version of the standard recipe, added with some chromium and a couple of little changes, making it, yeah sure, not technically D2, but Carpenter says it's a version of D2 that is stainless. And they're the ones that make it, so I'm happy to go with what they say. And then we've got a PSF 27, which is the D2 recipe, spray formed. So maybe that's what the SF stands for in the PSF, who knows. But this got a really great edge retention result, but it is not a completely stainless steel. It has some chromium in it, but apparently that chromium gets taken up using the, getting bound to the carbon, so a lot of it isn't actually used for stainlessness. There's some people who are better explaining this stuff than me. What I do know is that CPM D2 is kind of like the odd child in the family, the weirder one that's not really seen as much. You know, the one that maybe never moved out of home and just stayed there until the parents eventually got old and passed away. And then he just had the family home to himself. And so he never really threw anything out. So he just ended up in a house full of his worldly possessions and all the things that he thought might still hold some value, that he might need someday. And before you know it, he's a 50-year-old man living in his house, walking through the tightly trudged corridors of gear that, you know, everyone else would get lost in and find disgusting, but he feels like home. That's the CPM D2 of the D2 family, or as close to it as I can perceive. It's really not used too often. This is a Boca dozier knife. It's a little hunting knife pattern, very, very standard, classic hunting knife. I've used this to conduct some experiments on CPM D2, namely cut tests. So I've already done all the experiments, so this is more of a how I went video. So what I've got is an initial edge test, which came on the edge which came with the knife, which the owner had said, well, you know, it was mainly the factory edge, but I've honed it on the Lansky fine stone, and also I've had a bit of stropping on it as well. So that was a 20-degree edge, and I did my edge test with it, and it cut really well. It cut through the rope 225 times before it no longer sliced the held sheet of paper, and that's a great result for D2. For CPM D2, well, I don't really have a yardstick, but it's about what CTS XHP did with its work sharp edge, so also a 20-degree edge. So, you know, it's definitely playing the same ball game for sure. So that was really cool. It was a good first step. This is a really thick little hunting knife, but it does have quite a fierce hollow grind on it. So it does have a reasonably thin edge, but I did find it a bit awkward to put into my my KME holder because it's so thick and the hollow grind is so concave, really, that I found it hard to hold on to it. Anyway, my complaining aside, I got a nice mirror polished edge on it and I started a second cut test. And yeah, it's sissile throat. It stopped at 100 because it had rolled quite badly. So it had rolled just on the chopping board. There's nothing else on my board apart from rope and wood, and I was quite surprised by that. So I tried to strop it off entirely. I think, well, if it's just a bearing issue, then I can correct that with a strop. I can just strop the entire burr off and just have a cleaner apex burr free. Sometimes a burr actually does a bit of the lead cutting, for sure. It wasn't that, it was actually damage to the edge apex, like the actual, where the tip of the V, where the V meets. So I had to take it all the way back to the KME, and I did the exact same edge on it again. So whether that was anomalous or whether I had muck something up in the first sharpening, I did my second test, which was a much more successful cut test. And that cut test cut 440 times, which was a good result, and that's a very, absolutely fine result with a 17-degree edge. That is, in fact, about the same as what CTS XHP did at a slightly thinner edge at 16 degrees. So there you go. It's not the complete, disaster that you may assume it is, because you never really see it. So it's just a fine stainless steel. No, a fine non-stainless tool steel. That's the problem, is what I'm getting to. And I think that is why, although this is very much a good and competent steel in use, I think the reason is that there isn't really any benefit to choosing this over CTS XHP that I can tell anyway. At least in terms of edge retention, it holds the edge about as long as XHP does. Maybe even a little better if we took it down to 16, maybe it'd hold better, maybe it'd fold over again, who knows. But it is absolutely a fine steel. It's not bad by any sense of the word at all. It's probably just the fact that it's where everything else is done better. You put it in the spray form tech, maybe you get a bit longer edge retention. You put it in CTS XHP, it's more or less entirely stainless. You get normal D2, which doesn't hold its edge for as long as this, but it's so much cheaper and it's really common and everyone knows how to heat treat it, and it's just simpler. So I can really see why this is the odd one out in the family. It's a good result and it's a good performing steel, and if you have a knife in this, it's going to last a good long time. Its edge is going to do great, at least if it's anything like this. I don't know the details on the Rockwell or anything like that. All I can say is that mirror polish, 17 degrees, absolutely great. So yeah, just a curious case, the curious case of D2 steel. Whilst I sort of understand why, it's still nothing that's not, a reason for no one to use it, which seems to be what's happening. So I mean, for example, this is a Boker German-made knife using CPM D2, and this is, not a particularly big seller, I would imagine, in America or anywhere else. I'm sure Boker sells great in Europe, but really, it's a bit of an odd choice even for a hunting knife, seeing as you can see from the mirror polished surface, it has tarnished through the original user's use. And he says he's taken a few deer with it and has done the processing with it for those animals, and yeah, so it's obviously under normal use it has tarnished. So very, very interesting why you would choose it, but then certainly not a bad thing if you have. Anyway, that's CPM D2 so far from this single batch of testing. As I always say, don't just use my tests as your whole formulation of your theories on steel. All I do is one type of thing with the knife. So remembering there are lots of other guys doing lots of other tests, all I ever suggest is, before you start talking about how you think a steel is, just put it through its paces and actually use it. Maybe even use it in somewhat of a controlled way. I'm pretty sure then you'll feel a lot better reciting your own knowledge and stuff about, and opinions on the steels that you're using. That's all I suggest. Alright guys, all I like to show is how I come to my opinions, and that's how it is. According to my cut test, D2, CPM, a totally fine steel, but other steels and other versions of it do everything a little bit better. Alright guys, see you in the next one. Goodbye.